Hi friends, welcome to the Plain Fun RC channel. I'm your host, Saul, and we are working on mounting the motors on the ESM DO335. Let's talk about what we have going on here. So this is our E-Flight 160. We're going to be putting in 160 in the front and the rear. We're looking at the rear right now. And we've got our standoffs. These are some fantastic standoffs that I found on eBay. They're really great. What makes these so great is they're perfect for electric motors. They're small, they're lightweight, and they're able to accommodate the smaller screws that many electric motors use to mount. So they are fantastic, and I'll make sure to put a link in the description. Now, one of the issues I want to make you aware with these ESM models has always been the firewall. Now, at least with the rear, I haven't tried the front yet, but the rear firewall was definitely way off. And so much so we really had to put some additional spacers, as you can see the washers here, just to get the motor to center up properly. And that has been an issue with ESM. It happened on my previous model, the Atom A500, which you saw in the previous video, and it's happening here. So just keep that in mind. Go ahead and mount your motor, and then you'll be able to determine where you need to put the spacers, the additional spacers, so you can get the motor centered in relation to the cowling. And I'll show you what I mean in 2 seconds. All right, so you can see we have our rear cowling in place, and I love that rear cowling. It has that nice sharp point to it. Very unique. Anyway, what we're going to do, we're looking at the side of the aircraft, and you can see when we look at the side, look at the spacing of the back of the spinner as it relates to the cowling, and you can see it is really almost perfect. It is just up maybe by about a millimeter or two. It's angled up just about a millimeter or two. That's about as close as I could get it. Now, when we look at the aircraft from the top, you can see that for the most part, it is pretty much dead center, just a tiny bit off to the left of the fuselage is what I'm seeing here, just a tiny bit. So I can deal with that. That's fine. That minute amount can be trimmed out in flight. But anyway, that's what you have to do with the ESM. Once you get the motors in place, you'll need to slip the cowling on and use that as your point of reference. And you can see here, for the most part, it is basically dead on when looking at the rear of the plane. All right, friends, let's shift our focus to the front motor, and more to come. All right, friends, as we continue our update, we're shifting our focus for a moment over to the cowling. This has to be done before you go through and put the motor in place. So one of the things we want to keep in mind is the kit includes an inner ring and an outer ring. Now, the outer ring is going to be glued to the front of the fuselage. And the important thing to remember is that because our motor is being mounted in an X pattern, you want to make sure that when you go to glue this on the front of the fuselage, that the tabs that you see there where the cowling will be mounted to are sort of in a plus pattern. In other words, you don't want to mount them like this, otherwise they'll get in the way of the screws. You want to mount them so they're like this, okay? Now, once that's glued in place, then we're going to come back to our cowling here, and we take our inner ring, and what we do, the way we determine where we're going to be placing the inner ring is that we go through and we measure from the edge here, 15 millimeters, and then on the inside, you can see right down in there, there is a little black mark that goes all the way around where you see the cowl ring, and that front edge of the cowl ring lines up with that particular mark itself. Now, once you have that in place, then you'll just go ahead and run some epoxy. Make sure you run the epoxy on this side of the cowling, not on the opposite. The other thing you're going to need to keep in mind is that the ring here, the inner ring, you're going to need to sand that a little bit to get that to fit properly because it was way too tight. But be very careful, just a little at a time. Strongly recommend a belt sander because there's a lot to sand. So let's get our ring glued in place and our cowling in place, and more to come. All right, friends, we've got our cowl ring glued on our cowling, and our fuselage cowl ring is glued in place. All right, friends, we're going to let those dry, then we'll go ahead and finish mounting our cowling, and then we'll go ahead and do our front engine. More to come. All right, friends, as we continue update, we're going to shift our focus now to getting our rear control surfaces glued in place. One thing to keep in mind, you have to do one surface at a time because you've got to make sure it's upright so the epoxy doesn't run. So we're going to go ahead and start off with our right horizontal stabilizer, and then move on to our left, and then, of course, the top and bottom rudders. All right, friends, let's get started. All right, friends, our horizontal stabilizers are glued in place, and now let's shift our focus to our upper and lower vertical stabilizers here on the back of the fuselage. All right, friends, you can see we've got our tail section in place, and it just looks fantastic. Right now the plane's upside down, but really, really great. This is what makes the Dornier so unique. It's such a cool looking airplane. It really is, no matter how you look at it. All right, so we're gonna shift our focus now. We need to go ahead and we're gonna wrap up the rear of the plane by getting our cowling on, and then we'll go ahead and we will then move on to the other things that need to be completed. All right, friends, more to come. All right, friends, we continue our update. We're shifting our focus to our front cowling here, and we are going to be mounting our front cowling. So, you know, as I saw previously in the video, we've got our front ring, we've got our ring that attaches to the cowling, and we've got the ring that attaches to the fuselage. You can see it there at the very top. There's a tab up there. That hole is what you're going to be passing the screw through. So what we need to do is not only to drill the holes to mount the screw, but we're actually going to take one of our bamboo sticks or our bamboo skewer sticks, and we're going to put a couple in these tabs that you see there. What that'll do, that'll allow us to help make sure that the cowling is centered properly, and then we can easily put the screws in place to mount the cowling. So let's get started. All right, our cowl screws are in place. Now let's put our bamboo skewer in place. All right, you can see that we now have our bamboo skewers in place, and they will be used to help guide the cowling onto the fuselage. So let's go ahead. I'll show you how this works. You simply take the cowling, take your bamboo skewers, line them up with the holes that we just drilled, and very carefully insert it. And there you go. And it actually holds it in place. And then we can take our screws, like you saw a second ago, and simply insert our screws back into our cowling. And the nice thing about it is that you know that the screws are going to line up precisely every single time. One of the worst things that can happen in flight is the cowling coming off, and I've had that happen, and that's not fun. And there you go, and that's it. So it works great. Works really, really well. Very happy with this, happy with the way it came out. And our cowling is now done. All right, friends, let's go ahead. Let's shift our focus to the rear cowling and get that mounted as well. More to come. All right, friends, as we continue our update, you can see we've got our motor mounted, and it just looks fantastic. The cowling's on at the moment. It turns out you're going to need 87 millimeter standoffs in order to bring the motor up far enough forward so that it clears the cowling, and it just looks great. Really, really nice. Real happy with it. One thing I will say is I think I've done something a little different. The cowl rings that you saw in the video, I would have actually brought them forward a little bit further, about 7 millimeters, and I'll show you why. Right now we've got 4-inch long 8/32 screws on there, and when we look inside the cockpit here, or inside directly behind the firewall, you can see the screws are not quite long enough. So I've got to go ahead and order up some 4.5-inch screws, but outside of that, that's pretty much it. So the motor technically is mounted. We just need to go ahead and put on our lock nuts when we get the longer screws. All right, friends, more to come. All right, friends, as we continue our update, let's take a moment and talk about the electronics that we're going to be installing here on the DO335. So you see right off the bat, we have our Spectrum AR14400T receiver. That's a dual redundancy battery receiver, and that you can hook up 2 batteries, so if in the event one fails, it'll automatically switch over to the other one. We also have here our Robart electric gear retract unit. We have our Spectrum 4,000 milliamp 6.6 volt life battery. Now I'm thinking about using just 1 battery. This receiver will work with 1 battery, but I may go ahead and just use 2 because I do like the redundancy. We'll have to see how the plane balances out. Back here we've got our steering servo, as you can see, and with that steering servo we have a very long 3D arm, and I'll explain. So you'll notice the wires here. These are the steering wires that go to the nose gear. Notice how they go to these black tubes. We've got a black tube up here and a black tube down here as well. You can see that there as well. Those tubes help to guide the wires that are going to the nose gear. In order to make sure that these wires were unencumbered, we needed a very long 3D style arm, which is what we have here, and it works out really well. Then finally, one of the other neat features about the AR14400T is this really cool digital switch. You can see it right there, and it lights up when it's on. and then you just push it on and push it off whenever you want to turn the receiver on and off. It's really fantastic. Very, very nice. Now, one thing I will tell you, and this comes directly from the folks at Spectrum, this receiver, even though it's it's got a digital switch, this receiver, when the battery remains connected, when it's off, it still draws 0.05 amps. So it's very important that when you're not flying the plane that you disconnect the battery. One other thing you could do is you could put a mechanical switch between the receiver and the battery itself, and then that way you could keep the battery in the plane and keep it connected. So just some food for thought. All right, friends, that's what we have going on electronically. So let's shift our focus now to going through and getting our hatch in place for this whole area here, and more to come. All right, friends, as we continue our update, we are shifting our focus to our center hatch. And as you look at the hatch on this side and on this side, you can see the hatch is mismatched and that it is not sitting correctly at all. It is too wide, but that's an easy fix. We're going to bring these sides closer together, and the way we're going to do that is we're going to take 3 carbon fiber rods that you see here, and we're going to put them in between the sides of the hatch to help bring the hatch closer together. Let's get started. All right, friends, as we continue our update, we're looking at the hatch, and we are taking the steps necessary to bring the halves a little closer together. So let's talk about what we have going on here. We're using carbon fiber rod and hole reinforcers that I had left over from a previous battery tray kit. So if you saw the video for this plane, you saw me saw that I created the battery tray that went into the fuselage. These are some of the parts that are left over from some of those kits. So we are going to be using 3 carbon fiber rods, and we're using our hole reinforcers, as you can see here, to help reinforce the area where the carbon fiber rods are inserted into the hatch itself. Now, when it comes to creating the rod, or the hole for the rods, and determining proper location, we're taking our hole reinforcers and we are laying them here on the actual hatch itself, and then just going through and then drawing the circle, and then taking our hole maker here by Duratrax, that's this little device right here, and we're using that to make our hole. This is a wonderful tool. It's used primarily on Lexan bodies for RC cars, but it's fantastic when you have a painted surface such as fiberglass, because it doesn't chip. It doesn't chip, and that's real important. You can see one of our holes here and see how that the paint is not chipped while we have made our hole. If you were to use a drill bit, it would definitely chip the actual fiberglass or paint on the fiberglass, as well as the fiberglass itself. Anyway, we're going to go ahead. Let's make our holes and get our final carbon fiber rod in place, and more to come. All right, friends, as we continue our update, let's talk about what we have going on here. So we have a standard bamboo skewer stick. In order to determine the proper width of the hatch, we took our skewer stick and we placed it on the opening here on the hatch. And then after we've gone ahead and gotten the proper width, we mark that portion of the wood off on the opposite side. We then take that cut piece of wood, bring it over here to our hatch where our carbon fiber rods are located. We then go ahead and clamp the hatch to bring that portion of the hatch together, as you can see here on the one bamboo stick right here. And then we then go ahead and epoxy that portion in place. And we'll let that fully dry. Then we'll repeat the steps for the other 2 remaining carbon fiber rods, and that should give us the proper width. All right, friends, more to come. All right, friends, as we continue our update, we're looking at the hatch, and you can see on this side, it looks fantastic. Fits really well. Very happy with the outcome on this side. However, when we come on the opposite side of the hatch, you can see that the fit is not so great. I think what happened when I inserted the carbon fiber rods, it may have twisted the hatch a little bit, and therefore it's not fitting properly. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our hatch, we're going to go through, we're actually going to wind up cutting the rods right down the middle and see if that solves the problem. If it does, then I have another solution for mounting the hatch. So let's go ahead, let's give it a shot and see what happens. All right, friends, as we continue our update, after going through and cutting these, I determined that, yes, these were, in fact, causing the hatch to twist because one hole was a little off, which caused the hatch not to fit properly. But that's okay. We're just going to remove these entirely, and I came up with another technique, and that we're going to use 4 metal pins. And you'll see they're extremely long. Basically, even we know the hatch is wider than the fuselage, but it can still be squeezed together. So what we're going to do when we put the hatch on, we'll just give it a little squeeze, slide the pins into the holes that I drilled into the fuselage, and then what will happen, because the pins are so long, we're going to have hatch latches here and another one there as well, and we'll just slide the hatch down, open up the hatch latches, and just slide the hatch all the way down, and then lock the hatch latches in place, and that'll work great. So I've tested the fit, and I'll show you what it looks like. All right, you can see that the fit is a lot better. Right now, we're looking at the left side of the hatch, and when I come over to the right side, you can see the fit is actually quite good. It's not perfect because the hatch is not well made. It's not made in the exact dimensions as the opening, but this is a lot better than what it was before. So we're going to go ahead, glue our metal pins in place, and then we'll add our hatch latches. More to come. All right, friends, we went ahead, we cut off the remaining carbon fiber rods because we didn't need them there at all. We went ahead and we glued in place our metal pins, and we went ahead and put in our hatch latches. As you can see, this hatch latch comes with the kit. This one over here is from f3aunlimited.com, and I'll put a link in the description. And now let me show you what it looks like when we actually put the hatch on the fuselage. We take our hatch, insert our pins into the holes, like so. Bit of a squeeze to fit the other pins in the other side. Let it come down. Then we take our little hatch latches, give a squeeze, slide it down, and there you go. And the hatch is done. It's perfect. When we want to remove it, we simply grab our pins here, push it in, give a bit of a lift, and then just grab it, and it lifts right off the fuselage. Fantastic. All right, friends, you can see we've got our pull wires in place on our nose gear. Friendly tip, pass the wire through the innermost hole, never on the outer hole. The reason being is because the risk you run is that when the retracts, the loop can actually loop its way on the opposite side, get stuck there, and when the retract extends, then you've got a serious problem because it won't loop itself back around. So just a friendly tip there. All right, let's go ahead and shift our focus to getting our plastic exhaust installed. It comes with 2, one for the front and one for the rear, and let's get them in place. All right, friends, you can see we've got our rear exhaust installed and, of course, our wonderful front exhaust as well. And they really add a very nice little touch to the aircraft. All right, let's go ahead and shift our focus to getting our ESCs installed. More to come.